Alright, I know I'm a little bit behind on this one. I know that Dioscuri and Europa actually got buffs, but I'm like, you know what? Better late than never. And I'm a little bit worried about both of these because I just said a couple of days ago that, well, you know, Europa in, you know, the kind of 5-star, you know, free pick whoever you want guide, I was like, well, you know, Europa's like not the worst. Her kit is okay, but I feel like if they gave her a solid buff, she could actually be a rather decent servant. So I'm gonna see if I have to eat those words. And I've kind of pseudo been spoiled on Dioscuri. I saw a certain thumbnail that said they had a boring battery buff, but as someone that likes to use Dioscuri, if it's a 30 to 50% battery, I mean, sure, we'll take that. I probably would have liked it if they buffed up like their one-turn buffs. I think that would probably help them out a little bit more, but let's just stop daily-dallying and start looking at these. So, where would they put the buff on? What skill? This one? All right. So, ooh. Okay, this is not bad. Is it a little bit boring? Probably. Yeah, it's not exactly the most insane buff that they tossed out there, but I do like this. You know, buffing up their rates to 30% is not going to be the most insane thing, but you will notice it in that you're eking out little bits of extra damage, and your refund on your quick and arts cards, of which they have 2 a pop, and keep in mind their quick cards are also pretty good for refunding because of this skill over here where they get an additional 10% on their quick cards. It's gonna make your life a little bit easier. Now, are they gonna be like the most insane person for like 90++ quests? I mean, probably not. Like, if we just go look at their damage, because these guys are usually pretty good about updating them, their damage isn't the most crazy. They don't have a power mod that you can really take full advantage of. It's not like if, you know, we gave Sigurd like a big beefy battery that like he actually might have some use cases to just chunk one large dragon enemy, right? They don't really have that going for them. But, I mean, they'll be fine. Like, if you don't have any other options, if you don't have anybody better, and again, they're not story locked or limited in any way, so if you do happen to get extra copies of these guys, I mean, they could be a solid option if you want to bring them into 90++. That 30% battery in combination with the double Castoria offers them 90%. You would simply just have to open up their a pen skill, give them that 10%, then boom, you could start them off and they can handle any large enemy in a 90++ quest. Just keep in mind, if you want them to down some guy that has like 500,000 HP at NP1, you might be on a little bit of copium, right? Like, I don't think they're gonna be able to do that, but it will also just be, I feel, nicer going into more difficult content, right? I did kind of wanted to see it maybe put on this one so we could get the NP damage and the attack. You know, we can get those on 3 turns because these were already 3 turns. They were kind of low, but they were already on 3-turn values. I would like to see this kind of fixed up in the future because it does make them function as one of those servants that they have a really good first turn and then they fall off a little bit. But then again, they do have this over here to kind of help out with that. With each NP, more importantly, they're lowering the arts resistance, meaning that each subsequent NP will still maintain a decent bit of damage as long as you're, you know, comboing on the enemy and you're consistently dropping NPs on them, which isn't that hard to do because they have the Avenger passives. If they get passive NP every single turn, if a gust of wind hits them, they'll get some decent NP refund back. I mean, we've all used Jalter at some point, I'm assuming. I mean, that's kind of your rite of passage as an FGO player. At one point, you gotta use an Avenger, and it's probably going to be Jalter, but I can understand why this is dubbed, you know, not a very, you know, exciting buff or something that's like really cool for them to be doing, because this is like a light touch up on the character. But to be fair, I mean, what could they really have given them to not really spoil the role that they have? Because you could have given them, like, say, a power mod or something along those lines. I mean, after reading 5.1, I know that they do not like humans very much, so you could give them, you know, an anti-humanoid power mod, anti-man power mod, I'm sure could have been fine, but then that kind of just makes them like everybody else that goes down the checklist of like, okay, do you have a card buff? Do you have a battery? Do you have your, you know, do you have all the same stuff that everybody else has? I kind of like that they might be hitting lower lows. I mean, their base damage is not bad. I mean, they're right here because I know whenever I record on the browser or whatever, you know, it kind of cuts off the person, but like they're right here. They're like pretty decent. They've got some nice damage. And I don't mind them being a really good generic option, right? Like, so somebody like Sigurd might do a lot more damage, but he's more specialized into dragons specifically, whereas they lower damage, but they're kind of just good everywhere. So I don't really mind that they've been touched up a little bit to be more effective just in general. Like, I'm kind of fine with that. I like using the Dioscuri twins after 5.1 and 5.2. You know, I'm not the biggest fans of their characters, but, you know, they're still very fun to use, I think. But let's look at Europa. Please give her something good. So they didn't buff up her defensive abilities. Okay, it's not the battery or the card buff. Okay, so we're going from 60% chance to charm all enemies, which is like the Shuten Doji skill. Pretty useful going into harder fights. Reducing the defense, I think, with crit damage. So now we're going to buff that up too. We're not going to buff those up at all. Increases party damage with charm status by 30%. And increases party damage against enemies with Earth Attribute. I had to read that for a second. I had to do a double take. I thought it was just giving flat 30% power mod to people that were Earth Attribute. I was like, ooh, that's kind of interesting. But I was like, that doesn't make any sense because, you know, she has, it's Europa plus Zeus's wife. Oh, I'm forgetting her name. Oh, man, someone in the comments is going to yell at me for not, like, having my Greek mythology on down pat. Hera, that's, yep. She has Hera mixed into her because of a 5.2. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read Lost Spell 5.2 yet, I guess it's going to find that one out. But I was like, yeah, she should be Sky Attribute. That doesn't make sense for her to be buffing Earth Attribute guys. Although, maybe you could have made the argument for that, because, you know, you have, like, a lot of the European kings and, like, knights people, like Gawain and, like, your Artorias, your Lancelots, like, those guys are all, like, Earth Attribute guys. So maybe you could have made a justification for it. But this is really good. I like what I'm seeing with this one. Let me remind myself, she doesn't have she has debuff resistance, but she doesn't have debuff chance. I kind of would have liked to see that to kind of maybe guarantee that we could get this, but I wonder what fun little synergies you could do with Europa with this charm status. Because, again, keep in mind, she's buffing everybody's damage against people that are charmed, so you could just bring, just off the top of my head, you could bring like a Yugioh, for instance, and if Yugioh charms somebody, then everybody still gets that bonus damage. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think that's a little bit neat. It's probably not going to be the most nutty broken thing, but this is just a nice buff for Europa. This makes her, like, kind of interesting. I guess if you look at Europa's buff and you look at Dioscuri's, yeah, theirs is definitely more boring. This is kind of doing something fun. This opens up some new team compositions where, like, you can kind of go through looking at all of the charm guys or the debuffers that might be able to help lower enemy debuff, you know, resistance, or buff your ability to debuff the opponents. You might be able to open up some stuff. I mean, this might be kind of interesting going into 90++ quests, because often you'll have like a node of enemies that might have like 100k HP or something like that. So Europa could be really interesting if you wanted her to, say, down a wave and then pass off these buffs onto somebody else. If, say, the final enemy was Earth Attribute, and then, you know, you also have a chance to, like, charm them to give extra, you know, like basically like a 60% power mod, plus lowering their defense. The only thing is that Europa being able to down people without using this might be a little bit suspect, but I think the cook is still there. I think you could get in the kitchen with this one. Let me see what do they have her on this? I'm assuming not too terribly high. Her damage wasn't the greatest. Okay, so these are Europa's stats. No, actually, Earth Attribute, that's not bad. Why is the charm lower? For the same value. That's really weird. Am I missing something? I must be missing something. So the same value. They're both 30%. And she doesn't already have that. Okay, whatever. I'm probably missing something. It's like a solid like 3:40 in the morning. So maybe I am missing something on this one. Maybe it's like it's like the Sky bonus going into Earth Attribute, because I know that those are a thing. So maybe they already went ahead and calced that, because obviously you'd be fighting an Earth Attribute enemy, so she'd probably get that bonus. Maybe that's what it is. I just didn't think it was 4k difference. I didn't think it was that high. But yeah, Earth Attribute and Charm, considering that the Charm should be free damage, quote unquote, I'm doing big air quotes over here, that's not bad. Like, this is a pretty solid buff for Europa. Unfortunately, we kind of have a big Dongalus over here. You know, we got Iskandar, who's not only, you know, doing big free damage, but he's also buffing the entire party guaranteed every time, because he just gives you attack and NP damage. Also bombing stars, plus giving everybody crit damage to profit off those stars if you need to use face cards. Probably does still make Iskandar a bit better, but again, considering the fact that she is on every banner, you can see that they would have like limited or story locked up here. She doesn't have any of those, so considering that she's more of the free-to-play friendly option, again, doing big air quotes over here, I don't mind that she has a little bit more restrictions. And again, I would be really excited to kind of get in the tank with this servant and kind of start cooking with them, you know? See what we might be able to do with them. It was a little bit unfortunate because on my main JP account, I already went ahead and picked Nidochris Alter, and on my JP Alt account, I already went ahead and picked Kashin Koji because I wanted to play with servants I haven't really got to use too much before. But man, now I would have been really tempted to pick Europa because I actually like Europa. She's super dope in 5.2. If I knew that she got this like really cool buff, I maybe would have waited out for this one. But hey, maybe on NA. On NA, I do have Shuten Doji, and I don't know, maybe there's some like funny team brew you can do with like Shuten, Europa, and then I don't know, someone to keep him around. You drop in a Merlin, something along those lines, and call it a day. I don't know. I'll get in the lab. I'll get in the kitchen, see what we can cook with that one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I think these are both fairly like strong buffs. Dioscuri a little bit more on the safer side, Europa more of the interesting buff, but at the end of the day, I think they're both very strong, very good buffs. Nothing too broken, but I think they're very, very solid, and they help these servants out a lot. Lasengle, give us more of this.